You're going to always feel guilty if you're 1 minute from your child. You're going to feel guilty if your breast milk dry up. You're going to feel guilty when you go to change the diaper and the diaper was too wet.
Do I have children? I do. I have two children, 16 and 6, both girls.
We have one daughter, and she just turned 1 year old. 1 year old.
I have 2 children and 2 grandchildren.
I have 3 kids, and their ages are 23, 27, and 30.
Yeah, definitely. It's yeah, definitely feel overwhelmed for sure.
When I feel overwhelmed, I try to actually connect with our child.
For me, the biggest, the time where I felt most overwhelmed was when the first, I would say, the first 6 months of bringing the baby home. Whether it was the first, second, or the third. That was really difficult, really, really difficult. Although I had my mom for support, my partner at the time for support, it was tough. It was tough because I'm also a career woman, so I have a job, only 6 months off for leave, and so it was a lot to take in.
Usually you're overwhelmed because you're thinking of all of these different things, probably that are going to happen in the future, and I do my best to just kind of stay grounded.
Being a parent, you're always overwhelmed. It's basically how you channel that spirit and that feeling of overwhelmness. Because parenting is also fearful. And it's not fearful to be a parent. It's not fearful to mother. It is our environment. It is the new atmosphere of what our children have to be raised in and about and around them.
Do you ever feel like you need a break from parenting? Is there ever a moment where you're like, I'm tired of these kids? And do you ever feel guilty about those moments?
Every single day. You hear me? Okay. Kids always need something. Energy, money.
When it comes to breaks, it's really interesting. I think breaks have turned into like, oh, I'm going to work, because like you're working, but it's like the moment where you kind of feel like more like not taking care of the baby.
Luckily for me, because I am a single parent, my children go to their dad's house every other weekend. So every other weekend, I am off. Well, kind of not off because they still call me, but as far as a full-time parent during that time frame, I do not have to be that. So every other weekend, I am off. I feel like I actually have like the best setup, because if I were with them, then where would my kids go? They would be with me all the time, and I wouldn't get a break. And I don't know if that would be fair. I don't feel like you should have to parent 24 hours in a day.
My breaks are when she sleeps, and sometimes even then they're not, because when she's sleeping is when I have the ability to like actually really focus on my work, or clean up at home, or make her lunch, or figure out, kind of the next thing. In terms of guilt, I don't have great advice. I don't think it goes away. I think you have guilt when you think about you wanting to be away from your baby because you need your own identity and your own sanity. And then when you're in that moment, you still feel that guilt. So it's like, it's a double-edged sword that you're just always gonna feel.
Initially, like when your child is born, you're probably trying to go too hard and you're putting so much into your child that you forget to put into you. Then eventually you learn that you can't give to your child without giving to yourself. So you try to adjust.
You're going to always feel guilty if you're 1 minute from your child. You're going to feel guilty if your breast milk dry up. You're going to feel guilty when you go to change the diaper and the diaper was too wet. Guilt is a part of life. So any parent that feels that, you can rechannel that kind of guilt. When you have a child, it's almost like Jackie Kennedy said, you have contributed to the world when you have contributed to your own child.
Gentle parenting.
Yes.
What does that mean?
So gentle parenting first, I would say that I think people try to make this one thing and make it be good for everyone, right? You have different children who have different personalities because people are different, right? So each child cannot necessarily receive the same type of upbringing. And when you try to give each child the same type of upbringing, somebody's missing something because you aren't making the way that you're grooming them based upon who they are as a person.
Sometimes I get in trouble because sometimes I hear parents calling their kids, shut that, you know the word, sit your little, okay? So gentle means that you're gonna be humble and kind, but we gotta remember the frustration of the environmental reconstruction trauma that we're living in the city and many other cities. That a parent, and I don't want to use the overwhelm, it's fear. As I said earlier, it's fearful to be a parent because you want the best for your children. So that gentle, the word in itself, penetrates change, don't you think?
I think gentle parenting, a lot of it, I think is just like not hitting your kid, which is like how probably most of us were raised, right? Like, I appreciate it because I think a lot of us in our generation have a lot of unresolved traumas because I think a lot of it has to do with respect, right? Like, I don't think our parents realize maybe like if you put your hands on somebody, you're not respecting them, even if it means your kids.
You know, when I grew up, I mean, my parents beat us. They're good parents, they did the best they could and everything else, but that was a generation still where that happened. And when I had kids, I wanted to break the intergenerational approach, you know, where it's just like you do the same thing as your parents did, because they were also beaten when they were kids and before then and before then.
It forces us, our generation, to be more intentional about parenting versus just doing like what our grandparents did or what our parents did. Oh, this is how we did it. Like, no, we want to parent differently. We want the end result to be maybe a child that like doesn't have to work through childhood traumas.
I think it really would help break the cycle of perhaps domestic abuse because you've got, you know, spouses that beat each other, and I don't think that's a very good idea, but where did they learn that, right? So yeah, I'm for no spanking, no beating, none of that.
Now, do I have moments where I feel like it's difficult? So I have anxiety. It's something I was diagnosed with probably a couple of years ago, and I should have been diagnosed younger, but we don't necessarily talk about mental health in the Black and brown community. So I didn't know that I had it. I was just kind of like suffering, thought I was having these like kind of panic attacks or moments of being overwhelmed a lot. But once I started to do my therapy and take my medicine, it made it easier for me to be able to calm down in order to be a better parent. So if I hadn't, you know, sought out the mental health to fix myself, it would have probably been harder to be a gentle parent when gentle parenting was needed. I would say that Black and brown families are under attack, and the perception of them, and the perception of being a single mother. You know, for some people, they feel like that's a failure, but for white women, it's not.
Again, I'm gonna take you back to history. We've always been single parents. We've always been separated from our children, whether we're in the field and my child's up at the house, or they send my child to another plantation. Listen, we've always been single parents. But what sustained us was the love that we had for one another, the respect we had for one another. And your child is my child, and I'm gonna protect your child like you protect my child. And I'm not saying that it's not maybe impossible or it is possible that it's difficult. But when I look at the dark and brown community, we've always been separated from our families. We have to work 2 to 3 jobs to pay the rent. What's the difference between a mother not in the house working to pay the bills than a mother that was on drugs? Or a mother that's in the streets? If we would go back to the wealth of what everybody else sees in us, because we cannot be bad parents. There's no way. We breastfeed other people's children. We take care of other people's homes. We raise other people's children that look at us like their own mother. So what I say to any parent, start learning about who you are. Start learning about the strength of the black woman and the black mother, and the fact that you are the mother of the world. And start looking at those richness that come from your history, and even if the man is not in the house, I'm saying we have to lift our men up because of the conditions of society.
I think social media, obviously, is probably the biggest one, is filled with unrealistic expectations. 100%. As a new mom, I struggled a lot with, like, you see all these different things on your timeline, like how your baby should be sleeping, what they should be eating, how mothers should look, how mothers should feel, what husbands should be doing, what you should be doing for your husband. I think it creates too much pressure, and you can't help but be like, oh, it looks like it's going well for this person, so I should try and do it.
Oh, I think a really big one is, I think, affordability of life, like right now, like just having a decent life. I think that is the biggest pressure right now. And I mean, it was a pressure when I was, parenting young children years ago. It's just so expensive. I always said, like, you either have disposable income or disposable diapers. You can't have both.
Parenting is a whole world thing. Everybody needs to help be a parent. Whether you birth or you are guardian, a foster parent, or whatever, the whole community has to be a parent, Jacob, to save our children.
Adam has arrived.